This morning, Texas expected the census to bring 3 new seats in Congress. In the end, we're only getting 2. So what happened? Which part of the state gets those new seats, and will they be Republican or Democrat? Lots to discuss here. President Biden wants 500,000 new charging stations for electric cars. Where they are going and who pays for it. We'll talk to the White House. Republican reaction to the president's big new proposals. Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, one of the few in the room, as Biden laid it all out last week. And the number 2 lawmaker in the Texas House, Joe Moody, the Speaker pro tem, on the final month of the Texas legislature.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning to our viewers all across the state here. As we begin the month of May, let's begin our program with some of the top political headlines across Texas. Natural gas producers, they are announcing their first quarter earnings this coming week. This is important because gas companies are raking in the cash from those February power outages. They could sell their product at exorbitant prices to power plants needing to keep the lights on. Collectively, gas companies are believed to have made billions of dollars. On the other hand, power plants lost a lot of money. We'll be watching to see if the Texas legislature addresses this. The Texas Senate, though, passing an important piece of police reform. In unanimous vote, state senators banned police chokeholds. A lot of individual cities have already taken this step, but this bill now goes to the Texas House next. And the ACLU is calling on President Biden to close some detention facilities for undocumented immigrants, including some places right here in Texas. Turns out many beds are sitting empty at these places, according to the ACLU. 10 people filed a lawsuit against the feds on last Friday. They're being held at a facility in Alvarado, south of Fort Worth, and they say the feds are not protecting them against COVID. We're entering the final 4 weeks of the regular legislative session. What will lawmakers get done in Austin? What will they not get done? Maybe that's the more important question. Well, all of it is becoming a lot clearer now that we are in May. Our first guest this morning making his first appearance on our program, State Representative Joe Moody, the Speaker pro tem. He is a Democrat from El Paso and the number 2 lawmaker in the Texas House. Representative Moody, welcome to the program. Last week on our program here, we talked about criminal justice and a package of criminal justice reform bills that were making their way through the legislature, and those have finally moved. At least a large number of them have. What chance do they have in the Senate? Any idea?
You know, it's one of those things every session you wonder whether it's criminal justice reform or any other bill that we pass out of the House going forward, not just in 2021, but I think in as long as Speaker Phelan is Speaker. We will see criminal justice reform be a major plank of what we do every single session. And what are some of the bills that have already passed? Sure, we passed a number, in fact, small amounts of cannabis. It's a bill I used to carry, but this session being carried by Representative Aaron Zwiener out of Hays County. And so that passed today on a voice vote. Now, 6 years ago, when we first started doing this, we couldn't get a hearing on a bill like that. So it just sails out of the House now, and we've normalized this conveation.
Let me ask you, what changed with that, though? I mean, the Republicans are still have a majority there. What changed?
I think the people back home are talking to their representatives and telling them, we don't want to waste money on this type of prosecution. We don't think that's a good use of government resources. We know young people in our family that have been wrapped up in the criminal justice system because of these minor offenses, and we don't want that. That's not fair. These are right-sizing penalties. We did the same thing for THC because people today have a gummy bear or a vape pen or a brownie or whatever. The way the law was written, all of those are automatically felony offenses. So a 17-year-old kid with a vape pen is now looking at, because if he's on campus, 17-year-olds are adults in our system, by the way. If he's on a campus, he's looking at a second-degree felony. So, I mean, this just doesn't make sense. And last week I passed a bill to take all those penalties on THC down to the misdemeanor world where they belong and then ratchet them up from there, the way we do with every other drug law in the book. And so we've got that. We've done a number of bills around death penalty reform, and those are important and have garnered more support over the years, too. So watching things like that fly out of the House makes my heart very happy. Criminal justice reform is something that I've been working on in my entire time in the Texas legislature. But to see the House embrace it is pretty awesome. And Texas can really be a leader on it. And that's thanks to people like Speaker Phelan.
Let's talk about energy reform for a moment. Natural gas producers are posting huge profits, making money off of the power outages back in February during that week that so much of the state was without power. Electrical power plants on the opposite side are posting huge losses. It seems like something is broken there.
I couldn't agree more. And actually, what I would inject into that conversation is where are the fixes for consumers? Where are the fixes for folks that had their pipes burst or their food in their refrigerator rot? What are we doing for them? I do think we need to work in the industry side of things. There's certainly problems that have to be addressed there, and we've started to address some of them. But I haven't yet seen what we're doing for consumers that really paid the price.
Do you think the legislature will address either of those, either the industry side or the consumer side this session? I mean, the clock's ticking on you guys.
Well, absolutely. No, you are right about that. We're down almost to the last 30 days of session, and those conversations are happening in earnest. There's multiple bills around that touch on all those topics. So we still have opportunities to get those done. And quite honestly, if we don't, shame on us.
You're the vice chair of the calendars committee, which obviously helps decide what legislation makes it to the House floor. What is not going to get done this session that you hoped would?
I mean, one of the biggest things, obviously, for us is truly expanding healthcare in the state. I think we're losing an opportunity there, and I think it would certainly, help. I think that's probably the biggest piece of the puzzle that will not get put together, and things that, something that we know as Democrats we've been asking for quite some time now. And it would be good for Texas. It'd be good for business to expand healthcare in Texas. And so failing to do that for another session is certainly something that we'll walk away shaking our heads about. Definitely other things that, but I don't know there's anything bigger, particularly coming out of a pandemic, than expanding healthcare. All
right, Mr. Speaker, Pro Tem, we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Now to one of the biggest issues in the Texas legislature. Constitutional carry, letting anyone carry a firearm without a license or without any training. It passed the House but did not have the votes in the Senate. At least we didn't think it did. Abbott, though, says he will sign a bill allowing Texans without permits or licenses to carry guns if the Senate can pass this legislation that has cleared the House. So there's a lot of questions about this. Joining us from Austin, as always, Ross Ramsey, co-founder and executive editor of the Texas Tribune. Ross, what's going on with this? I thought it didn't have the votes in the Senate, and now is this a tactic by Abbott to get it passed, or what?
Well, this is one of the kinds of pieces of legislation where if you poll members privately, it might not have the support, but if you poll them publicly where everybody's watching, you do get the support. I think that's part of what happened in the House. Nobody expected this to come up in the House, or few of us did. And once it came up, it passed pretty easily. Now it's in the Senate's hands. The House has passed it. The governor has signaled that he's willing to take it. And anybody in the Republican Party who wants to pressure the Senate has to go to the Senate and tell them about it.
Well, this puts Patrick in a tight spot, the lieutenant governor in a tight spot. So what happens at the end of the day? Does this get passed?
I think he's under real pressure to get it passed, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does. He's got a lot of power over there. The Senate may be reluctant. But again, if you flush this out into the open and put it on the floor of the Senate, it's going to be hard for some Republicans to vote against it.
Let's talk about the $11 billion that the feds gave Texas, and now the lawmakers are passing that out to schools finally. There's another $7 billion on the table. We're not really sure where it's going to go, when it's going to be distributed. Any update on that?
They got the $11 billion, which is what the school districts wanted. They want to get going on learning loss, which is, where kids would be if they had gotten to this point in the year without any virtual learning and everything. So they need to catch them up. They want to get that started in summer school. The governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker released $11 billion to get them started. There's still $7 billion, as you say. Right now, it's in the hands of the governor and the Texas Education Agency. But keep your eye on that because it could change.
Indeed so. Thanks, Ross. Back to you in a moment. Coming up, President Biden's big new proposals, major investments in America. But Republicans have questions. Among them, Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne. She is with us next. And President Biden discussed a bold new plan the other night to get more people to drive electric cars. His national climate advisor is with us in a moment. You're watching Inside Texas Politics. Have you gotten your property appraisal in the mail yet? The value of property in Texas, no doubtly, is rising again. It's great if you're selling your place, but when the value goes up, so do your property taxes. There are some ways to reduce it. These are free ways, and it's not that hard to do. So says realtor Chandler Crouch.
We all want to see our neighborhoods increase in value. We want to see we want to have great schools. We want to have all the good things that come with living in a nice area. We just want to be able to afford the house that we bought and not get forced out of it by taxes.
So Chandler has some solid advice for us. This is the latest episode of Y'all-itics, and if your phone is handy, you can download it right now. Aim your camera at the QR code there on your screen. It will open a window and take you directly to this latest episode. Y'all-itics is the name of our political podcast, and we drop brand new episodes every Tuesday. Democrats and the Biden administration are out promoting the president's big new plans. The American Families Plan would provide things like universal pre-K and 2 years of free community college, among other things. President Biden unveiled it last week in his joint address to Congress. And several Texas Republicans were in the room that night, including Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne, a Republican from Irving, who has a lot of questions about what she heard.
I just look at it as more expansive federal government control over our lives. Again, it's a plan that we have no idea how we're going to pay for, but it sounds good on paper. The problem is when you start taking his plans, his programs, and putting them into action, what you're finding is decrease in jobs, decrease in independence, and much more of a dependence on federal government checks. And I think that's a mistake. I mean, I'm talking to small businesses across our district. You know, I come home as often as I can. I'm home much more often than I'm in DC. And what I find is these small businesses, these small employers are having a tough time right now hiring people. Everywhere that I go, whether or not it's a large restaurant or a mom and pop restaurant, or even some of our smaller companies, our larger companies, everybody's saying they have hiring signs outside their doors, but they can't get people to come in and apply.
Yeah, what is the answer to that? Because we've heard that as well, where some businesses are just having trouble finding people because they can, take that stimulus money, make the same amount at home. What is the answer? Because there are some people who do need that stimulus money.
Well, we are encouraging people not to go back to work. We're incentivizing them not to go back to work. And that was supposed to be short term when we were in the beginning stages of this pandemic. But we've gotten over that. We've moved beyond that. The state is starting to open up. So we need to stop incentivizing people to stay home. And we need to encourage them to get back to their offices where our small businesses can thrive. They're willing to hire, they're wanting to hire, they're wanting to expand. And that is ultimately should be the goal, as opposed to extending out these, again, bloated programs that are doing nothing more than killing our businesses, killing our employers. And in long term, I think doing a lot of damage to our economy and to our American psyche.
It seems like that the only way that Democrats will get this passed is to pare it down. The question is just how much. Would you be on board with a pared down infrastructure plan?
Oh, without a doubt. I believe that we do need to stay competitive. I look at our transportation, our infrastructure is crumbling across the country. We need to address that. But we need to make sure that we're doing it responsibly, and we have a path of being able to pay for it. But I also think we need to identify what programs that we're actually going to support, what are the projects that we need to be focused on, and let's define what infrastructure means, instead of it being everything from paper plates in public schools to childcare. I think we really need to pare down and approach it in a bipartisan manner.
All right, let's focus in now on one thing that President Biden spoke about last week there in his joint address to Congress: electric vehicles and public charging stations. Right now, there are about 100,000 charging stations across the country. President Biden, though, wants there to be 500,000 of them. The hope is it will convince more people to buy electric cars. With us now is Gina McCarthy, the former EPA administrator for President Obama. She is now the National Climate Advisor for President Biden.
Mrs. McCarthy, thank you for the time. Let's start with this goal of the 500,000 charging stations. Are these going to start popping up on the corners everywhere like gas stations?
I don't think it's going to be like gas stations, Jason, but you're going to see a lot being constructed, and they're already getting constructed. And that's because, the automakers are really banking on electric vehicles being the future. Many of them have said that by 2035, we could have 100% of their vehicles on the road being electric. And so it's an exciting shift. For all of us who like clean air and want to address climate change, but it's also they're terrific performing vehicles. So that's why the president and the American Jobs Plan has really committed to constructing about 500,000 charging stations, because it's really important for people to know they can get where they need to go and get back again, so they're comfortable to actually make the shift to a car that's cleaner and that is going to help us really address the challenge of climate change.
And most people often charge their cars at work or at home, but this plan would include public parking lots, apartment buildings, and rest areas along freeways. Is that right?
Well, I think the freeways are particularly important because you can use the faster charges along there so that folks can quickly get where they need to go and continue on. But you're right, it's not going to be a system like gas stations. It is going to be a system in people's homes. A lot of people will be able to afford to have it, but in apartment buildings, that may not be the case. So you want to look at parking areas, want to look at on streets. In the city where I live, they have free charging stations in parking areas. So a part of this is building it and supporting it through federal dollars because it matters to actually move our country forward. But it's also about coordinating with the business community.
Let's talk about timing and price tag on this. How much is it going to cost? Who pays for it? And how long will it take to get this done?
Well, it is one of the basically investments that President Biden is looking for in the jobs bill. But it's also going to be needing to get some partnership and investment with the business community. It's going to take a while to roll this out, as we know. I'm hoping that we can get these investments recognized soon, and then we can start construction. But as I said before, it really is going to be an opportunity that will require us to be strategic about where to place them, to get some partnerships with the business community so any dollar that we spend is enhanced with private sector dollars. But it will give us an opportunity, I think, to see that we can escalate the amount of electric vehicles out there as consumers get comfortable that they have the infrastructure available.
Mrs. McCarthy, we appreciate your time.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Texas expected the census to give us 3 new seats in Congress. In the end, though, we only got 2. So what happened? We will begin right there, coming up next on the Roundtable.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Ross is back with us from the Texas Tribune in Austin. Bud Kennedy is here from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And joining us this week is Abby Livingston, the bureau chief for the Washington, D.C. bureau of the Texas Tribune. The Trib very well represented here today, guys. Thanks for being here. But Ross, let's start with you and the big news about the census. Everything I'd heard forever was Texas is getting 3 new congressional seats. In the end, it was only 2. So what in the world happened?
Well, we were a couple of 100,000 people short in the final count. And, I guess New York feels worse. They were 89 people short. If they'd had 89 more people, they wouldn't have lost a seat. But Texas gets 2 seats instead of 3. That means there's going to be less federal funding by a nudge over the next 10 years. And it means that the redistricting people who've been plotting for 39 seats in the House are now plotting for 38.
And so the big question that a lot of people are asking, Bud, is where in the world do these go? And are they R or D seats?
Well, of course, they'll be split between the 2 growing metro areas. But the big fact is that Texas now has 40 electoral votes. That's 2 more Republican votes for the next couple of cycles. And Democrats will see if they can't change that down the line.
And Abby, people or Democrats I'm talking to are just, pretty upset about this, saying the governor just really, messed the whole thing up by not really working to get a good, accurate count.
Well, it's a complicated situation, but what I'm most interested in here is Republicans will have the power of the pen in drawing these maps. And my central question is, do they take an aggressive stance? Do they want to get as many Republican seats as possible? Or are they going for incumbent protection to try to help the Republican members of Congress withstand demographic changes over the next decade?
That's a great point. Any chance that both of these seats might turn out to be Republican seats?
I think that could very well happen. I think there's a lot of different ideas going around about where these seats could land, but Republicans have less restrictions on their map drawing abilities because of a Supreme Court ruling several years ago.
Yeah, good points there. Ross, let's talk about President Biden's first 100 days. We heard him last week give his joint address to Congress, but a recent poll shows that, Texans are kind of split down the middle about him. Did his address to Congress change anything? Did his big new proposals change anything for Texans?
I don't know that they did in the polling. I haven't seen polling since the speech. I do know that, his policies poll better than he does. So if you ask people, what do you think of the job that Joe Biden is doing? Or what do you think of Joe Biden? You get one set of numbers. In Texas, that's slightly, but not overwhelmingly negative. If you ask them about policies, they like some of this stuff.
Bud, what's your take on this?
Well, the speech was preempted by hailstorm coverage in two major markets, DFW and San Antonio. So a lot of people didn't get to watch the Biden speech this week. Texas really doesn't know much about Joe Biden. There's no visible Democratic leader in Texas speaking for Biden at all. You just don't see or hear about Democrats any in Texas, and that includes the president. We're hearing from the 2 or 3 different parties within the Republican Party.
And Abby, that's a great point. What he said about there's just no one really speaking for the president here, no prominent Democrat. If Democrats, want to get over that hump and say we're a purple state, they've got to work a little harder on this.
Well, that is just the perennial problem of the Texas Democratic Party, which is there is a very weak bench. And there was a real opportunity in 2020 to cultivate potential statewide candidates at the state ledge and in the U.S. House level, and they just didn't execute. So this is a problem that Texas Democrats know well.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, Abby, Bud, Ross, thank you guys so much. We appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for watching as well. We're back again next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics. Hope you can join us then. Take care.